Welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at the KZ SK10 TWS. And first, I do want to thank the Luck LZ store on AliExpress for sending this review sample to me. I do appreciate any review samples I get. It helps keep the content coming. So if you look on their store today, it's $42.99, about $43, and at its low point it was $41.56. So maybe $1.50 more than it has been at its low point, but a pretty reasonable price for a Bluetooth 5.2 TWS, and it's pretty much the same price that other KZ TWSs have been recently. So pretty much in line with what they have done in the past. What they haven't, this is new with the SK10, is this new case with the window on top. They've done a round case before, but this one has a nice see-through window. And the shells themselves are actually quite nice. This is the silver, I think they call it the silver, but it's actually the clear shell version. And it's super nice. If I'd known that you can't see as much in there as I was hoping to, it's kind of clear, but then, you know, there's a board there with the Bluetooth chip on it, there's a battery there, and then there's some drivers underneath. So you can't see as much as I was hoping, but not too bad. If you squint in the corner, we can kind of see the BA is tucked right there in the corner, not in the nozzle, it's actually in the corner. So super cool. You know, you don't see too many TWSs with clear shells, so I do appreciate the look. Once it's in your ear, of course, you can't see them, but to hold it between the case and your ear, it feels cool and looks cool. So let's kind of get into it. And so it very much has a fun, energetic, older KZ classic sound to it, is what I would call it. If you're familiar with the ZSN Pros or something that had one of the older hybrids that had a dynamic driver and a BA which sounded a bit tinny or metallic, it kind of falls back into that model. So it's very much fun and energetic and a big sound, but not as natural as some people are going to be hoping for, considering some of the recent KZ wired IMs. It's not like that. It's definitely more of a throwback, weird, questionable BA sound. So if you can get past that, which I can, because when I'm using TWSs, I'm probably outside, and I'm not too listening to quiet vocals. I'm usually listening to some higher energy electronic music, and it is absolutely fabulous for that kind of genre. If you're into just quiet vocals, you know, maybe not your cup of tea with the SK10, but you know, it follows kind of that pattern of electronic music tends to be a lot more forgiving. It falls very well into that V shape, and this one is very much along the lines of that model. So 6.5 hour battery, that is definitely true, not just marketing. I sat there and let it play all day, and it didn't quite hit for 6.5 hours. It was somewhere between 6 and 6.5, but I didn't actually figure out where it actually stopped working. So, but I will give them the benefit of the doubt because I had it up at a volume that was probably higher than what they measure at. But it'll definitely hit about 6 or 6.5, which is a huge step forward from where they have been in the past. The Bluetooth codec, again, it's AAC. This one is AAC, not aptX. So, but generally, I think the Bluetooth chip that they use is quite a bit ahead of what they've used in the past. The one in the past, kind of the codec itself was okay, but the background noise was higher. Used more battery. I think this one is pretty right on. I think they did a pretty good job with this new set of electronics compared to what they put out last year. So third, as I mentioned, the BA is kind of a questionable quality, so I had to EQ the whole upper range down a bit. It's really intense. It's kind of fatiguing and intense and thin or metallic. However you've described KZs in the past, they pretty much nailed that sound. So I definitely dropped it down quite a bit, and it just made life a whole lot easier to listen to for longer sessions. So I would do that if you get your hands on an SK10. So what does it sound like? It's definitely a huge V-shaped sound with recessed mids, which isn't too surprising if you followed what KZ has done over the past 5 years or so. So we look at the graph, and especially those of you who are familiar with the KZ-Z1, which is a 1DD version of kind of a similar TWS model. But I love the Z1. It was their most natural TWS that they put out. Plus, it had a big V-shaped sound, it had a big bass and a big treble. It was actually in balance and quite a nice, energetic sound as well. But didn't have a BA to take that natural off in a different direction. So, but if you had the Z1 and looked at this graph and said the SK10 has even more bass and it rides above the Z1 a little bit and it rides higher above in the treble section, you'd kind of be scratching your head like, did the Z1 really need a little bit more? And apparently it did. So that is the SK10, and that's the bass. I don't mind because it's just a little bit more. I mean, it's a big bass sound. It's fun anyway. This part is, hits you in the ear in the wrong spot. A couple of these peaks hits your ear, but it's going to become fatiguing pretty quickly. So I do suggest dropping that whole section down a bit and get it to something more reasonable, maybe something closer to where the Z1 was. So the bass, as I said, big bass, and it remains mostly controlled. It's not like a big distorted, very older style KZ, big bloated bass. It's just big and it's mostly controlled. You can definitely tell they're using a newer driver compared to their older ones. So it's not as good as the Z1, but it definitely went for quantity over quality, and it's really for bass fans who like an over bass sound. A very big boosted bass sound. I don't know how else to describe it. That it's very much, if you've ever tried a KZ with a big bass sound, it sounds exactly like you're imagining. So even a song, kind of like a rock song, like Lydia Hawk's Let It Roll, it starts off, kind of bassy, a little bit, not too bad, mostly in control. And then when you get to those parts with the chorus at 32 seconds and 124, and then you just end up with a really big bassy foundation. But the vocals are still clear because there's a bunch of height in the stage. And I didn't really expect it in the SK10, but they really did a good job on stage, and we'll talk about that towards the end. But really, this stage saves a lot of the sort of other problems that happen here with the bass or the mids, because the stage is wide and all the positioning and imaging and layering and separation, all those things come across really well. You never end up in a very compressed, everything on top of each other sound, which would have absolutely destroyed, this set. So they definitely got that right. So the mids, like I said, they're going to be sandwiched between big bass and big treble, and when that happens, they sound quite a bit recessed. They never quite get over those boosted, bookends. So on their own, they actually sound pretty good. Georgia Smith's Blue Lights, her vocal, it's a bit distant and a bit dull, but not too bad. And it's relative, right? Her voice is kind of dull relative to this huge bass and this huge, treble that's kind of off natural. That sounds better with electronics. So her voice is kind of not as lively and energetic as it should be compared to those two bookends. But even a song like Little Mixes, No More Sad Songs, which has higher range voices, much more energy, and their voices are much more forward. So at 48 seconds, not too bad. They still struggle to get over the bass, and then at 206, when there's more bass, more synths, that's sort of exactly where the KZ sounds great. It's not so much going to be in the vocals, but it's when songs rise in both of the two ends. That's exactly where the SK10 sounds the best. So the treble, kind of the same problem, overboosted, and it sounds like an older KZ BA, especially without EQ. I'm not sure I would suggest using it without EQ unless you listen to a volume that's quite a bit lower than I do, but at my volume, it's kind of fatiguing to take. But if you want to know another song that, electronic, high energy, electronic song that fits this one almost perfectly, Blasterjack's Rise Up. Recent song, jump to about 50 seconds, and you'll hear that big bass, big synth, very engaging, huge energy, electronic tune, and it will let you go as loud as you can take it. That's where the SK10 kind of lives for songs like that. So for me, I love that kind of music, so this set is perfectly fine with me. If that's not your cup of tea on music, then maybe look at the SKS, which was more of a neutral style KZ-TWS. So as I said, the stage is sort of the saving grace, which makes all this quite listenable. It sounds wide and it has some really nice height. Even a song like Avishai Cohen's Teardrop, that trumpet is just high and center, drums, guitar, everything has a position, and nice separation. It's kind of weird how good it is. And I think people will say that the recessed mids give you or allow this kind of width in a soundstage, and I think if that's true, then it definitely works here, because the stage and just the width alone is quite good for a TWS, and especially a KZ TWS. So I was really digging the stage, and for me, I could listen to stage and high energy music all the time without having all that high energy treble fatiguing congregated right in the middle, which would have been a big mess. But this is kind of spread out nicely, and quite a nice presentation for a reasonably affordable TWS. So that's about it. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.